Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to give it a few more minutes to allow some people to trickle in. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Laura Madayo. I am the Director of Global Marketing and Communications here at Yamaha Unified Communications. We are so excited to have you all here today. We're having our first public webinar about our VSP2 speech privacy system. I'd like to make you aware that this webinar is being recorded. So yes, we will send you the recording at the end of the presentation. Additionally, there's a Q&A function right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be monitoring this, but we will hold answering the questions till the end. And with that, I'm happy to introduce you to my colleague and the man of the hour, Balazs Boldog.
Laura, thank you so much. Really appreciate that warm introduction, and thank you all of us for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk to you all about the Yamaha's very new to the United States VSP2 speech privacy system. We think it's a completely revolutionary system, and I am very hopeful that you all get something out of this webinar, and that you reach back out to us with your needs for your facility or any design services, which is something that we're also going to start doing this for this system. And then we can take it from there. But again, as Laura had mentioned, please save your questions for the end, or that is into the Q&A, so we can address them at the end. So without further ado, this is not sound masking, it's speech masking. So here we go. So I really like this slide here on the left-hand side. It really does an amazing job of demonstrating and kind of bringing to light the issues of acoustics in the modern office. So it was a survey conducted a few years back at this point by the Center for the Built Environment, and it took into account about 25 or so thousand people that were surveyed in hundreds of different buildings. And we are not just seeing this still representative of today's situation, but in fact getting worse. So when you look at general satisfaction and maintenance, office layout, office furnishings, air quality and lighting, those are very highly rated. So the more little people that you have there, the happier they are. The less you have, the more dissatisfied they are with the space or with these different features of their space. So I like to come back though to the thermal comfort of the space, because to me it seems like no two people can ever agree on the temperature in this space, right? In the office. Someone next to me might be wearing a sweater and have a space heater on and be shivering, while I'll be in a shorts and a t-shirt and I'll be sweating. It's just the way that we are. So when you look at it, then acoustic privacy is rated significantly lower. And I'm inclined to believe that these numbers are further being reduced and kind of bringing acoustic privacy even more to the forefront. LEED, as much as they're trying to help by now adding, sound masking, actually they added sound masking or a speech masking system back in 2008 into the specifications for LEED. But a lot of the other sort of features of LEED have really brought the acoustics and the acoustical quality of these spaces drastically down. So when you look at daylighting, bringing partitions down, increase the use of more reflective surfaces, things like that have really been to the detriment of acoustic privacy. So on the right hand side, we have all of these wonderful regulatory concerns, right? So HIPAA, as I'm sure many of you know, basically is a set of laws that said that a healthcare provider has to take reasonable safeguards to protect patient privacy. And more often than not, that's one of those little signs that you see at a pharmacy or at a doctor's reception area. That's just to stand back behind this sign. If you get lucky, you might have Mozart or some classical music kind of to pull up that ambient sound pressure level. But what typically happens is it's not a concern until it's too late, for that healthcare provider, and they're possibly being sued by someone that has had their information compromised. HCAHPS is a survey that inpatients will take upon leaving a healthcare provider. And what that says essentially is, well, there's a series of questions. And one of those questions asks, how well did you sleep at night? How was the quality of your rest? And that is hands down very similar to this graphic on the left-hand side, the lowest rated among all of these questions. So with the addition of a speech privacy system into the patient areas, or the areas where patients are getting rest, has, exponentially brought up those results. And that means that the healthcare provider is getting more money back from the government. That's how they're rated, and part of the money that they get back relates to these surveys. And more importantly, it means that the patient can recover quicker, get out of the hospital quicker. So it's very important. GLBA basically says the same thing as HIPAA does, except as it relates to the finance world. And then we talked briefly about LEED. So I absolutely want to talk about sound masking, right? Because this is not sound masking, and we'll check on that as to why here in just a little bit. But sound masking is the addition of a background noise to basically promote speech privacy and to help keep the space free from distractions. The source can literally be anything. So back in the Roman times, it might have been a fountain to kind of bring up that sound, to mask the sound of chariots on the cobblestone. It can be a lawnmower, right? It's absolutely going to bring up the ambient sound level, but to the detriment of the listener, it's going to be pretty obnoxious. So it's certainly not going to be a good solution. So what you see there on the left-hand side in that light bluish gray shading is the recommended spectrum for a sound masking system. And this spectrum has been the same since the late 1950s, since Bolt, Brenneck, and Newman developed sound masking for the United Nations. The United Nations called upon them to come up with a means of actively increasing speech privacy. And they developed sound masking, so when they're having conversations, very sensitive conversations, located really close to different and neighboring countries, right? They had to find a way to protect them and to protect these conversations without them going across to someone that should not be overhearing it. And that's when sound masking was developed. So just about all manufacturers of traditional sound masking systems agree that you have to stay within that shaded area for the system to be effective in promoting speech privacy, but also to be a comfortable sound that won't be overly distracting. And then you see that kind of compared to white noise, which I'm sure you've all heard white noise. It's very obnoxious, very hissy. Pink noise is certainly much more comfortable. And actually, we use pink noise quite a lot to tune different systems. And so with masking, essentially, there are several pitfalls by just utilizing a sound masking spectrum. Essentially, it'll mask conversations outside of about a 12, maybe to 15-foot radius, depending on the amplitude of the speaker and the receiver of that message. I've tuned several million square feet of sound masking in my career thus far, and I've never tuned a masking system to less than 48 decibels in an open office space. Reason for that is it's much easier to come down in sound pressure than it is to go back up. But more importantly, they just aren't very effective below 48 decibels. For an open office area. In a private office area, you're looking at a lower sound pressure level. And the other issue is they have to be installed very uniformly. The whole idea and the premise of an effective masking system, one of the key elements is uniformity. If you hear a deviation in sound pressure level, you're going to realize that something in your environment has changed. It draws more attention to the system, the masking system, and thereby it makes it annoying and less effective. So this is the VSP. And it is completely different in how it works. I think the most major difference with this system is the speech masking system that is built into it, right? I didn't say sound masking, it's speech masking. So what Yamaha engineers did in Japan, now this system has been around in Japan now for over 3 years now, but we got it relatively recently here in the United States, about 8 months ago or so. But with this speech masking system, what it's able to do is it actually more actively camouflages the conversation. And as it does so actively, it can do so at a significantly lower sound pressure level, all the while having it be more effective. So what that means is essentially they've taken the 44 phenoms in the language, in the English language, because there is a Japanese version. So when you listen to this system, it actually sounds like you're hearing a lot of conversation. It's not just a whooshing sound, but there's actual conversation or phenoms that are used to do this camouflaging. Now, to add on to those, onto that speech masker, what we're doing is we're adding one of 4 environmental noises as well. So you can soundscape with this system. You can do a forest sound, a babbling brook. There's a cityscape setting, which I like very much as well. And then there's a flow of air sound. We call it the HVAC system, but I still think we should have called it something more environmental, like flow of air, because that's essentially what it sounds like. So all of this is coupled with sound effects as well, which we also have 4 of. There's like a guitar riff, a piano, very, very nice. And I would recommend those settings to be used in a space like a reception area where someone is expected to be maybe no longer than 15 minutes. You probably wouldn't want to have that going on all day in a space where, you know, someone's going to be sitting 8 or so hours. So to kind of dive back into this, because of this speech masker system, we're actually able to cover up, right, to reduce the speech intelligibility by more than 50%, 50 to 65% more effective. And that is from 8 to 10 decibels less. Now, keep in mind, 10 decibels is a doubling or a halving of the perceived loudness. So we can almost be at half of the loudness, the perceived loudness of the sound masking system, while being up to 65% more effective. Essentially, just to back up what I said before in a visual representation, that orange line that you see there on your left-hand side, that is traditional sound masking. All right, all of these graphs relate to the overall sound pressure level of the system and the recognition of words, the intelligibility. And I do want to touch on that before I actually go on, because intelligibility is critical for speech privacy or a sound masking system. That is the definition of intelligibility, right? So what happens is when you begin to understand a conversation, what is actually being said, and you can pick out not even a majority. If you're, for example, if you can understand 80% of what is being said in a conversation, that might as well be perfectly intelligible. At that point, you're even at 50% in many cases, you're still able to understand just about everything. So the long story short, before I go off on a tangent trying to explain intelligibility, is understanding that what is important to these systems, all of them, ours included, is that it's not certain words. Certain words you may recognize or overhear, but it's piecing it together into an intelligible conversation or sentence. And that's where we begin to lose Distraction, that's where distraction occurs and serious confidentiality issues occur. But what this graph again is showing you is the overall sound pressure levels used by traditional masking systems versus the Yamaha VSP2 system. We're able to play this system significantly lower and all the while having it be up to 65% more effective. So it's significant. So some of these different environmental noises produce slightly different effects as it relates to the recognition of words. We see that there. With the most effective really being the forest, and with that speech masker turned up to about 30%. Now, I didn't touch on that. I'll get to it here in my next slide, but that speech masker can be adjusted. So you can adjust how much of that you actually want being played over the environmental sound. This system, Yamaha is really revolutionizing the speech privacy market by making it something very, very simple. You no longer need an acoustical engineer to really dive into this and to tune the system, because that was one of the big shortfalls, honestly, with many of these sound masking systems is your end result is going to be influenced really by whom it's installed by. Not so with this system. It's very, very simple. If you look at some of Yamaha's other technologies, what they've really done is embraced sort of that residential market philosophy of, they'll provide a microphone with a home entertainment system. So when you turn it on and you go through this automatic commissioning, it tunes the system for you based on feedback from the different speakers in the environment. And it does so automatically. Very similar sort of mindset put into this system. It's extraordinarily effective. It doesn't get much more simple than this. You essentially turn the unit on and thereby set in these different settings. You adjust for the volume and the space that you need for the type of environment you're in, and for the speech masker, and you basically use one of the environmental sounds that's most comfortable to the employees in the space. So this system is significantly easier to install in your space, regardless of the type of space. So they're actually shipped with these tile mounts that actually pop right onto the grid. So you don't have to drill into the acoustical ceiling tile. You don't have to use a nail gun to get a big heavy plenum speaker into the plenum space. These are surface mounted on the walls, or like I said, with this tile mount, it pops right on to the grid itself without having to cut into the tile. It's much less disruptive because we're able to play it at about 8 to 10 decibels lower than a conventional masking system, all the while being significantly more effective. And because we're able to get this much lower sound pressure level, we're able to really do something quite special with this system and is more effectively treat hot spots. So without having to cover the entirety of a contiguous sort of office space or an open office space, we're able to really target onto where the true issues are. Each one of these units can handle 2, 4, or 8 speakers. So if you do need more than 8 speakers, you would just get another system to back it up. And we have, like I mentioned before we jumped in, we are going to offer design services as well. So if that's something that we can help out with, if you have a client or this is for your own space and you're not comfortable designing your own system, send it our way. We'll send along information of how to do that. But it is an extraordinarily easy system to work with. So there's a huge case. We talked about HIPAA at the beginning of the slides. So as we know, there's a very serious reason to have speech privacy in clinics, hospitals, and pharmacies. Corporate offices, prior to COVID, were absolutely speech privacy's bread and butter. That seemed to make a drastic shift over to the healthcare market during COVID. But now, a lot of people are coming back to the offices. The other thing that's happening is there's a lot of, kind of a pick and choose between who's going to be back in the office, who's going to be working remotely, and what have you. But what's very important to note about speech privacy is it actually becomes more important if you have less people in the space. Now you're no longer getting that cocktail effect to bring up the ambient sound levels in the space. So what ends up happening is you're now able to overhear and understand. Remember, very important, intelligibility is understanding those conversations happening from much farther away now that the ambient sound pressure has gone down. So it's become even more important now in corporate offices. Hospitality is great for this system. We already have the soundscaping built in. Now you're not going to be overhearing what's happening in the space next to you. Call centers, for the very obvious reason, is you've got a lot of people jam-packed into a relatively tight space, and they're going to be distracting one another. They might even be distracting people on the other end of the line from overhearing someone else's conversations. Co-working spaces, wonderful application there. They've really kind of grown in popularity as well. And because of the simple fact that you've got a lot of different types of companies located in short proximity to one another, you need speech privacy in these kinds of spaces. Education is great. Libraries, outside of the counselors' offices or principals' offices, make a great case for it. Legal environments, for obvious reasons. Houses of worship, dealerships. We're making a big push into dealership type environments because traditionally, sound masking vendors or manufacturers have not really been able to get much traction in that kind of an environment for many reasons. But because we are such a simple and targeted sort of a system, we have a much more effective solution for these kinds of environments. Government as well. But keep it simple. So if you're a reseller of these products, or if you're the end user considering speech privacy for your space, the way to get the conversation really started is just ask a handful of questions. Can you overhear conversations? If you can overhear my conversation, or I can overhear this conversation, is it safe to assume that you can overhear my conversation? And is it distracting at all? And then you kind of move over to, well, are any of these conversations confidential in nature? More often than not, it's very rare to find someone that says no to all of these, or in some cases, any of them, right? But keep it simple. Would you like privacy with that? So if you're an integrator and you're building out this space, that's fantastic. They've, built a $500,000 conference room. Everything's top of the line. But keep in mind, there's a huge chance that the acoustics of the space have not received this same sort of an upgrade. And the most sensitive conversations are very easily going to be overheard outside of this beautiful glass conference room or boardroom. So keep it simple. Keep it as simple as, would you like privacy with that, or fries with that? Again, thank you all so much for your time. And let's have a quick peek at the questions here.
Yeah, Balazs, we do have a few questions I will prompt you with, if that's okay.
Please do.
We have one that says, I see no option for zoning or large spaces needing more than 8 speakers. Do you have to just keep buying more controller and speaker sets?
Great question. You're certainly not the first one to have asked that question. We'll address that at some point with next generation products. But at this point, yes. So the whole idea was simplicity. Keep it off the network. Let just about anyone set it up to be extremely effective, and do that very simply. But yeah, so to answer your question at this point, you would need to add a controller for every type of different area you were looking to cover. But again, kind of the sweet spot with this system is really treating those hot spots. But I didn't mention before, and it kind of leads into your question, is we were wondering how the system would scale. And to give you an idea, it did extremely well. I did a design for a nearly 50,000 square foot space. And, we were wondering how would it actually scale by needing all of these head-end units to run it? Well, we came in $20,000 lower than the next nearest competitor. So it was pretty remarkable. So yeah, that was kind of a long answer to a really good question.
Oh, that's okay. So we have another that says, does the speech masker work on its own? And the reason for that is they said they cannot picture a professional organization wanting an environmental sound.
That is a very good point. It does not work on its own, but here's my recommendation to that. And as someone who's been in the speech privacy industry for way too long, I myself got very used to the sound of sound masking. So the other phenoms that were used at first took me a little while to acclimate to. So what I did was I used environmental sound number 4. Which, as I mentioned before, is the sound of HVAC. It sounds a lot like a traditional sound masking system. Once I braved that, I moved into environmental sound 3, which is the bustling city. And that one really just sounds like you're in the middle of a trade show floor. But when you add to that the speech masker, it is just remarkably effective. So that was kind of my natural progression. And now I'm all over the environmental sounds, the babbling brook, and all that good stuff. But it took me a little while to get used to it as well. For someone that's acclimated to a sound masking solution, it does take a few hours. But once you've done that, then you have all of these benefits to this system.
Great, thank you. We have a couple more for you, Balazs. Are there any in-tile mounting options on the way?
Any tile? There may be. So in tile, you said, Laura?
Yes, I know that may be another question that is a potential for down the line.
It certainly is. And that's as much as I can say at this point, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have another. What square foot space does each speaker cover?
It really varies. Like with most speech privacy systems, or direct speakers, it really depends on the ceiling height and the type of an environment that you're in. With our system, it's pretty safe to say that in general, you'll hit just about 200 to 220 square feet of coverage per speaker. And it grows from there, really, depending on ceiling height.
Okay. We have a compliment and a question for you here. This is a great overview. Is it possible to demo this in a session, or is there a link to a demo yet?
What I would suggest, and this is something for marketing to consider. I think it could be a really neat idea to do that somehow in a video, to have a pre-recorded sort of a demonstration. But honestly, there's nothing more effective than having that the VSP2 in your own space where you have these issues and hearing it for yourself in your own live environment. So it's really tough to replace the effectiveness of a live demo. We can make videos left and right, but really at the end of the day, it's you no longer being able to understand your colleague, who empirically has been super loud, what have you, or distracting, or hearing your colleague next to you from the office and overhearing all of their conversations. I think it's a neat idea, but at the end of the day, I think the most effective way to really showcase it is to hear it in your own space.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Does the VSP2 offer analog outputs to be used with existing systems?
Great question. There are no outputs on the system, but that is also something that we're looking into, and we're looking into different ways of getting the signal to different types of speakers. So we'll have to get back to you on that one when we have something more concrete.
Sure. I have another few specific questions. What is the dB of the speech masking?
It completely varies as to the setting that you actually dial in on the speech sound masker, right? So that is adjustable for how much of it you want. If you take it down all the way, you can basically have it so that you can just barely make it out, irrespective of the type of environmental sound you're using. And then, of course, there's the volume itself. So there's the volume which adjusts separately from the speech masker. So as far as the overall sound pressure level of just the speech masker, I'm inclined to say it's pretty darn loud. I'd probably say it could get up to about perhaps maybe 89 or so dBA, which is significantly more than you'd ever want it to be.
Perfect. Thank you. We just have a few more.
Yeah.
Sound masking systems like HVAC noise tend to become fatiguing. Does this speech masking have the same issue?
It should not, and it does not. So what we're doing is Yamaha's gone to great lengths to make this system as comfortable as possible. And they did so by, studying sort of sound masking and the pitfalls that a traditional sound masking system kind of brings with it. And, one of the things that they noticed was overall sound pressure level can become, kind of annoying and bothersome at the end of a day. So if you're sitting in the space for 8, 9, 10 hours, however long it may be exposed to the masking, it can very much become annoying. So they did the exact opposite thing. They found a way to make it significantly more effective by using these phonemes and by using environmental sounds, which, someone mentioned earlier that you couldn't imagine it in a corporate environment. And while I understand that, I think it's really a matter of letting them experience it for themselves, and we do have sounds that sound more like a traditional sound masking system, but you don't have to use those. So all in all, just the fact that we're able to push the system sound pressure level 8 to 10 decibels lower, that should lead to basically non-existent fatigue.
Perfect. So we are coming up on time, Balazs, so we can follow up with any remaining questions via email. So thank you so much, Balazs, and thank you all so much for joining us today. You'll hear from us, like I said, in a follow-up where we will have the recording. So please let us know if you have additional questions that we may not have covered. In addition to that, I would like to let you all know we will be announcing 2 new products from Yamaha UC next week. So please follow along on our social pages next week, as well as don't forget to register for our next webinar where we will have this announcement. It will be next week, November 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.